Now, let's get some expert analysis on the Korean government's latest stimulus package.
Well, joining us live in the studio is Dr. Junsok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea.
Professor Yang, welcome back to the studio.
Happy to be here.
Right. First, your overall impression of the new economic team's grand growth package. Which ones do you think will prove to be the most effective and which ones perhaps less?
Okay, well, overall, it's a very active, very expansionary package. Some of it has very good economic basis. Some of it, I think, is promising, fulfilling the promise that what they made politically. Now, as far as the policies that I like, it's actually hidden in the large report. But they have something called, they have a $5 trillion safety fund. And what they're going to use that safety fund for is to encourage private companies to help improve Korea's infrastructure. The older infrastructure, they will try something called rehabilitate, transfer and lease, or rehabilitate, transfer and operate, which means, well, it's like the build, operate, transfer contract where a private company comes in, they improve the old infrastructure, and then they're allowed to operate it for a certain amount of time to recoup their investment. And there's a $5 trillion won fund to help carry out this rehabilitation. So that's a very good way, I think, to use the private sector to help improve the older infrastructure, which is falling apart or in danger of falling apart. So I think this is very good economic policy, especially in light of the what we've seen in the Sewol incident and some of the infrastructure which are falling apart. Also, I think they have a lot of funds set aside for accelerated depreciation for companies, which are usually effective in trying to get companies to invest more. They also have some policies which really made the news, the LTVs and DTIs. I personally don't think that they'll have as big an effect as the government hopes that they will have. I think a lot of people will use it to get additional loans rather than trying to buy a new apartment, but it may help spending somewhat. But I do like the fact that they've unified the rates. Before they had different rates for Seoul, different rates for the outside Seoul. They had rates for commercial banks, rates for savings banks, and they now unified it. So I do like that aspect.
It's set at 60%, I believe, is it?
It's set for, the LTV, I believe, is set for 75%, and DTI is set for, I think, 60%.
Right, right.
And then there's taxes on retained earnings, the cash that the companies keep. The government's intent is, instead of the company keeping all this cash, they will use it for dividends or increased wages, so that they would actually spur spending, either private consumption or investment. I'm not quite sure whether that will be successful, because in order to avoid taxes, they might just send the investment overseas or the cash overseas. So if there's no good investment opportunities to begin with, then I'm not quite sure why they think that the companies will give this out in dividends. So that I'm not too optimistic on. Also, there's a lot of incentive to change part-time workers into full-time workers. That's been tried before. And I think we can expect similar effect as before, which is it's working, but maybe not as well as...
It was mediocre.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that will probably continue. It's better than nothing, but still, I don't think you could expect too much from it.
What was good is that they did not try to give the people what they want, but explain in detail their plans. And it really sounded like they worked out all the little nooks and crannies, and that's what you liked about the plan. But of course, they did also announce they lowered Korea's economic growth forecast to 3.7%. Not much of a surprise there, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the year when they made all these projections, the Bank of Korea projection and the government projection was on the very much higher side. The international organizations was in the mid 3% range. The private Korean research institutions were on the lower 3% range. So I think government was perhaps too optimistic when they made these projections, and they're aligning it more realistically, coupled with the actual fall in consumption right after the Sewol incident.
Well, I think the stimulus package has gained, support from most economists around this country, but some are voicing concerns that it may be too focused on the domestic economy and thereby neglecting the export side of the Korean economy. What's your take on that?
Okay, well, I think exports has been doing well. Not as good as we hope, but still surprisingly well given the changes in exchange rates and the changing conditions in the international economy. And the big villain for the economic slowdown has usually been seen as domestic consumption and investment rather than exports. So I think this is a chance for Korea to maybe focus away from exports a bit and try to concentrate on the domestic economy. What I am worried about, though, perhaps more than not paying too much attention to exports, is a very good chance of increasing the government deficit and the household debt. I think that is a serious risk that we are running here. I think the big difference between this current economic team and the last one is that they are willing to take this risk.
Well, Dr. Yang Junsok, Professor of Economics at Catholic University of Korea, thank you so much for your time, and always great to have you providing us with some refreshing insights on the matter.
Thank you for having me.